that early though now. Now I have to wait till 11.
So we didn't have to do it at 9 a.m.
Well, yeah, because I didn't know and I wanted to make sure I had enough time.
Okay.
You're in here anyway.
I am in here anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
You're just.
I coulda
I
worked
thought you
out.
were a morning person. You're such a ray of sunshine
I
this
am
morning.
not a morning person. You have that completely backwards. I've never been a morning person.
Well, you get up early.
I know, but
right?
it's yes, but that doesn't mean I'm a morning person. I have to get up early.
I'm not really a morning person either, but I'm used to getting up early.
I know,
So
but I
it's
don't like it.
I don't either, but it's like
I'm a night person.
I can still be cordial with other human beings when I'm up in
cordial.
the morning.
I'm being cordial.
We're the only ones here in the office, and so like she's banging on the door, yelling at me to let her in this morning because I was setting this up.
I'm sorry, it's raining.
Okay, but there's a little hangover. You recovered.
So I'm just going to
Look,
stand there for 20
Look,
minutes.
the hangover right there. You weren't getting even wet. So,
Moving on, let's talk about what we're really here to talk
all
about.
right. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we're going to be hitting negotiations today. We're going to be covering buyers, sellers, listing appointments, so on and so forth, and just kind of the basics of negotiation because now that is really relevant in today's market.
Yeah.
And I know we were talking about this before we started. It ain't easy.
No.
It's pretty tough out there. So kind of talk about what you're running into and what you're seeing out there on the buyer side.
Yeah. So I actually have quite a few buyers right now, and it is a challenge. And I think even more than ever now, they need a realtor that's educated on how to negotiate because it is a very tough market. And I, just like probably most of you, have lost out on plenty of homes that I've written offers on, even where I feel comfortable that it's a really aggressive offer. And I think what I'm learning is building that relationship with the other agent beforehand, calling them, talking to them, and not just the, hey, what are your sellers looking for? But I really tell my buyer's story. You know, I want to tell them that, you know, this particular buyer is really in a time crunch because their home is closing or whatever their scenario is, and see if that sparks something that might help me to have an advantage when I write my offer. You know, that's where I start at least.
Okay. So let's just say that listing agent says, hey, you know, just so you know, we have multiple offers. How would you go about trying to navigate getting your offer accepted?
So one of the things that I like to do before I even call the agent is I have a number in my head from my client. You know, I already know what my client can go to.
So you're already prepping your client.
I'm already prepping them,
Okay.
but I'm not going to give away the bag when I call the agent. But I will throw out a few scenarios. So, for example, if I were to write you an offer at $300,000, would that get the job done?
Okay.
If they're, and you can tell, you can kind of feel, and they might say, well, does that going to include free occupancy? Well, sure, we can do that. And I start to build my offer based on what they give me. And it doesn't always work. I know it sounds really easy to do, but it's not. But if I have a number, and almost like what we do when we're dealing with like a for sale by owner
Yep.
type scenario,
Yep.
I throw out a number. That's not going to be my client's bottom line or top line, but it gets the conversation started where an agent will go, you're not even close. And then I have to go back to my client too and be really honest and say, hey, we're not even in the ballpark. Are you willing to be this aggressive, and see where they're at? And if it's worth it for us to really push, then we'll push. If they say this is it, this is my house, this is the one, I'm gonna advise them then that you got to go all in.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but I would say first is prepping your client that, hey, if you want to go into this, just know we're probably going to have to do highest and best. So what are those? What am I going to war with, right? And then two, kind of feeling out that listing agent to see, because who knows what they're going to divulge. Some people will just blatantly tell you.
They will. It's crazy.
It's crazy. Some people are more professional and aren't going to do that. But that's the art of negotiation, right? You got to throw stuff out there to see how they respond, and based on how they respond, that's going to give you a better insight as to, okay, what do I need to offer, like occupancy? Is that going to include free occupancy?
Right.
Now I know that's something that's important to the seller.
Right. And I do think too that, you know, hopefully, and we're all in the same boat, a lot of times we run into agents we already have a relationship
Yep.
with.
Yep.
It's an excellent opportunity to touch base with them again to kind of rebuild that rapport. Hey, I know we did this deal together. We had a great transaction, because all agents want to have a great transaction. So if you're reminding them, hey, we worked together before and it went pretty smooth. Hopefully we can make this one go smooth too.
Yep.
Kind of, you know, pre-closing them and seeing if that's if that works.
Right. That relationship with both buyer and seller, but other agents that we don't really spend too much time talking about, that is important, because if you have a relationship with an agent before going into a deal that you had a history of going through good transactions with, they're probably going to lean towards your offer because they know what you represent and how the transaction's going to go.
Right. I mean, they're going to share that with their sellers. I've worked with this agent
Yep.
before, because I do that. I will let them know that, hey, I've had a really good relationship with this agent. I know how they do business. They're very honest, ethical, upfront. No hoops to jump through, minus the typical everyday sales part of it.
Yep.
And that can sometimes sit much better with a seller.
Yep.
So.
So we know kind of the strategy, but what are you including? Because I know you told me that you had a conversation with an agent not too long ago, and you had mentioned an escalation clause, and they didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
So, like, what are you including in the offer to help you get it accepted?
Okay, so the first part of that is I talk to my buyers first before I ever call an agent, ever write an offer, and I explain to them, because they don't know and they shouldn't know, what everything is, what an appraisal guarantee is, what an escalation clause is, and I tell them, if you look at me and tell me this is my forever home, gotta have it, I'd be devastated if I didn't get it, I'm including an escalation clause. I'm including an appraisal guarantee within reason of what they can afford.
Yeah.
I'm including a highest and best offer, free occupancy, all the bells and whistles. If they tell me we really want a shot at this home, but we're not willing to give up our firstborn, basically.
Right.
That's when we start to peel back. What are you comfortable with? What would you be confident that you walked away with this house, that you're happy with what you gave? And so I kind of lay out every option, or we like it, but we're not, we're just kind of want to see what would happen. Then we're not writing the aggressive offer that might win it, but it'll at least get them understanding the market a little bit better too.
Okay.
So.
All right. And so when you submit your offer, like, let's just say you're going in a competitive situation, is that when you submit your best price and terms, or do you try and feel out what the best deal you can get for your buyer?
Well, it depends. That's when I usually make the call to the agent.
Okay.
I don't like to write anything until I've talked to the agent, only because if I talk to an agent and they're like, yeah, we have an offer, and you can tell they're disappointed with that offer, it changes how I'm going to go about it.
Okay.
And I have had that happen. I have it often, actually, where agents will say to me, yeah, we have an offer. It's not exactly what we were hoping for. And then I'm starting to tweak things in my offer. If I have an agent that says, oh, we have 3 offers, it is strong, it's competitive, and I will ask them too, hey, are you over asking? I am very blunt with it. I'm not asking them to give me a number, but are you over asking? And you'll know. They'll tell you. They'll be like, yeah, way over.
Okay.
Then I go in with just we got to give it all.
Okay.
No beating around the bush.
Have you ever had a buyer waive an inspection?
Many times, and being completely transparent, I'm not a fan of it. And I advise them too that what you're giving up is the right to walk away. I mean, unless the appraisal were to come in bad, but
Right.
You're giving up an opportunity to really know this house, and it is very risky. When they do that, I have them sign an inspection waiver form,
Okay.
because I'll be honest, to me, it's crazy. I understand what's happening in the market, but for me to actually advise my client to do it, I can't do that. So I will tell them actually the opposite. You have this option. I wouldn't advise it. I wouldn't do it if it were my personal home, but it is an option. If you say this is your forever home and the only way you're going to win it is waiving that inspection, then that's a choice you have to make.
So leaving the choice, everything she's saying is leaving the choice up to the buyer. It's not us telling them what they do,
Right.
but just, hey, here's the options. If you want to get this offer accepted, here's what we potentially have to do. Now, what would you like to do?
Right. And I will have buyers when they lose a house. Why are we losing the houses? And I have to look at the market and tell them, hey, here, I know in this case you offered X amount, people offered this. If you're comfortable offering more, then we need to do that.
Yeah.
If you're not, then you lost the house because it just wasn't the right one.
Right.
So it's not that they're doing anything wrong. It's, hey, if these are your parameters and you have to stay within these, you have to stay within them. And I also have people who win the house and the next day are going, oh my gosh, how much did I just pay for this house? What did I do?
Yep.
And you don't want that either.
No,
So-
it's a delicate dance. So the buyer, I mean, that's a tough end of the situation, but let's flip over to the other side, the seller side. How do you negotiate to ensure that you get the best possible price and terms for your sellers?
Well, that's a great question, because right now, although the market's great and it's a seller's market, I am noticing that there's a little bit of a shift there. it's not a bad shift, but it's still, last year it was like you couldn't ask for better.
Right.
The biggest thing for me is I want to ensure I have a really, really good buyer. So as we hopefully are all doing, are talking to the lender, making sure that they're not throwing everything at it to win and then want to back out a week later. So it's really important to make sure that they're well qualified and that they understand all the terms of the contract, which is why when I speak with an agent, I'm very clear. Like, here's what we're looking for. Can you meet it? If you can meet it, I want to talk to the lender. I want to make sure that your people are solid because I don't want to get into a deal for a week, have somebody get buyer's remorse, and walk out because of this high bidding war that we're in all the time. So that's my first step with the seller is kind of doing my homework on the side before I sit down with them and go over the offers that I have in hand.
So how many of you guys actually do that? You actually do the homework ahead of time as opposed to just taking, the pre-approval letter and the terms on the contract as is. That's why you get 6%.
Right. And it's important because you're doing a disservice to your client. If that buyer walks away, no, you can't control everything, but if that buyer does walk away, have we done everything in our power to ensure that we knew it to the best of our ability that it wouldn't happen?
Yeah.
And if it does happen, things happen. I mean, that's okay. But I would expect my agent to have all that homework done because I'm paying you a lot of money to do it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And that's just part of the professionalism and why we get 6%.
Right.
So are you a highest and best situation, or how do you go about handling multiple offers?
I am a highest and best situation. And I know it's frustrating, right?
Yeah.
We see that on a listing and we're like, oh, I don't even want to show it to my buyer. But in all fairness, I want the first person that saw it and the last person that saw it to have equal opportunity to get in there. Because just because of a timeline, I've had agents tell me, well, they went with the first offer because he saw the house first. And I'm like, interesting.
Yeah.
If I didn't have that one appointment beforehand, I could have got the house. So to me, in all fairness, plus, it's the best for my seller. It is the best opportunity for my seller to get either the most money, the best terms, whatever it might be, the most offers. And it'll also weed out those who weren't very serious. Because if I do a highest and best and they decide not to write, they weren't willing to compete in the way that the others were anyway. So it weeds those out.
Okay, I like that. So we talked about both buyer and seller, but how about us negotiating with our own seller before we get the contract signed? Meaning that, hey, we're at the listing appointment, we're negotiating all day long at the listing appointment. And one of the big ones that I press upon the agents that we work with is a lot of times, especially in this market, sellers want to potentially start a little bit higher than where they need to be.
Sure.
Just because, they want to test the market. We can always start high and come down. You guys have heard all that nonsense. And a lot of agents, if they think it's within that, realm of reasonability, they'll say yes right up front.
Right.
But then the seller will say, okay, well, let me think about it.
Sure.
Because you forfeited all your leverage and you got nothing in return for your agreement.
Your homework, yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So if you're in that situation and you've got the price narrowed down and it's reasonable, it's close enough to where you're going to take it. If they ask you that question, well, will you list it at X price? Your answer should sound something like, if I'm willing to list at X price, will you sign with me right now? So that's way they're getting the agreement that you're wanting to list a little bit higher, and you're also getting the agreement from them on the spot that if you do, they're going to list with you.
I agree. And I am also very, very clear that even if we list a little bit higher, this market will tell us.
Yep.
I don't make the decisions. You, Mr. Seller, do make the decisions, but the market really makes the decision.
Yep.
So I will be able, that's the beauty of this seller's market though, too, is if you do list a little bit higher and you're not getting activity, you're not getting offers, something's off.
Yeah, the market's speaking.
Because the market is so strong right now in that regard that if you're not getting those things, you'll know right away. And I tell my clients, please expect a phone call from me in the first week. It may not be a price change. I'm not going in that route necessarily that first week, but I am going to educate you that, hey, here's what's going on. If you haven't had showings and your 3 neighboring houses or neighboring comps have, there's a reason.
Yep.
So we need to reevaluate.
It's not me, it's not you, it's the buyer in the market that ultimately determines the value, right?
Right.
And everything that she's saying, it's just the constant theme, setting expectations, because that's going to make that conversation easier when it comes about. And how many of you guys, I'm sure you run into this too, is when you're dealing with a negotiation with potentially another agent and they get so emotionally invested because they need that deal, right? So art of negotiation, art of the deal, I think is where I got this from, is you can't negotiate unless you're willing to walk away. because unless you're willing to walk away, you're too emotionally invested, and that clouds your rational judgment. And then you either make a mistake, you forfeit leverage, or you express you're desperate so much that you ultimately just accept a lower offer because you already showed up all your cards. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I also think too, going back to that, I mean, we all want to work for our clients. And me, I take it personal sometimes because I don't want to disappoint my clients. But when it comes to me dealing with the agent,
Yeah.
they don't see that. So yes, you're allowed to feel the feels of frustration or whatever, but it cannot be put out there to the rest of the universe.
Nope.
So when I have agents that will start swearing at me or what, they get so frustrated, I will very simply just say, I will talk to you later when you've calmed down. And I hang up the phone. And that sounds really rude and I should probably let them vent, but I'm not going to tolerate that. So
No. Well, they already spent that commission check.
Yeah.
So
It's gone.
They got that credit card bill coming up, so they need that money.
Right.
But that's, again, putting your clients at a disservice because you're now serving your own self-interest in negotiation. Now you're emotional about it. And now you've put your seller or buyer in a really bad spot because you're serving your own self-interest at that point.
Yeah, one thing I want to go back to, you brought up if a seller does want to have a higher price, and before I accept anything, I keep hitting this, I'm sorry. I've done it like 3 times. Before I accept anything from them, I will reiterate the comps with them one more time and say, now it's interesting that you're choosing that price point because based on what we looked at and what I can prove to an appraiser, I always say that because I have to prove this to an appraiser.
Yep.
That's my job. Based on that, what makes you think that that price point is valid? I want to hear why.
Yep.
And if they give me a valid reason and say, well, because we have quartz countertops instead of whatever their reason is, if I feel like that's something I might be able to include in my listing write-up or somewhere that can add value, I will.
Yep.
If not, I will have a conversation about it and just say, my concern is X, Y, and Z.
It's a great point. And I have an agent right now that's dealing with that. It's a for sale by owner. And they've been on the market for, God, like 8 months.
Wow.
So they listed it, took it off, listed it, took it off, listed it, took it off. Of course, went through a couple of agents. They started at $925.
Okay.
Now they're down to $799. Now, they're for sale by owner. So if they list it, they want to go back up to $825.
To get their commission, because
Right.
that's what they're thinking.
Right. And so this agent and I were discussing this. I'm like, okay, so ask them this question. How is it that I am going to justify a $25,000 price increase when you haven't been able to sell this home for 8 months? How is that going to work? And you know what their answer was? We put on new shutters on the house.
Okay.
So you want me to tell a buyer that you have to pay a $25,000 premium because my seller doesn't want to pay commission because you have new shutters on the house?
Which are really a maintenance thing, by the way.
It's a maintenance, yes. So
yeah.
that's another point. There's a difference between maintaining and improving a property.
Right.
Redoing a roof, redoing an AC unit, replacing windows, putting a garage door on the house. That's maintaining property value.
Right. Right.
When you buy a house, you're expecting to have a roof on it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's not improving value. So even though it's costly, it's not going to improve the value. It's maintaining the property's value.
Correct. The one thing it does do, and this is why I always in my write-ups make sure it's in there, is those items create buyer interest.
Yes.
They make them feel more safe. They make them feel when you are comparing houses, like, oh, this one has a new roof. Okay. That doesn't improve that price point.
It improves the saleability.
Yes, absolutely. So if you're talking to a seller, let them know that is what they've just done and tell them what a great thing that is.
Yes.
That doesn't mean it improves that number, but wow, now you can really compete out there because you've got all these things buttoned up.
Yep. And also flip it from the perspective, right? Because again, we're looking at, when we're presenting in front of a seller, we should be looking at the comparables through the buyer's lens.
Yep.
Right? So I get that, you feel you've dumped a lot of money into this, but if a lot of this was maintaining property value. So again, assuming it from the buyer's perspective, if you were a buyer and this seller says, I want $25,000 more because I put on a new roof and I replaced some windows, would you as a buyer feel that that would be a good enough value for you to increase your asking price by $25,000?
Right.
Of course not.
Yeah, they have to look through a buyer's lens too. It's hard.
It
I mean,
is.
you have to almost draw the picture for them because it is really hard and they are emotionally invested. That's their private home. They've raised kids there. And so there's a lot of emotion wrapped around it. So you have to take that away a little bit and just maybe even use let's just say this was the home next door,
Yep.
not your house, the home next door. And they decided to increase their price because of X, Y, and Z. Would you see the value in that? And that way they're not thinking about their personal home, because sometimes that's what gets in the way of everything.
Yep.
You know?
So our specialty, remove that emotion.
Yes.
Right?
Take it out.
Rationally, just look at it from a number database as well as from the buyer's perspective, because that's ultimately who's going to determine the value.
So that to me is probably the most important conversation that I have with my clients, is really just being able to have them look at it from that perspective. When I lay comps out in front of them, the first thing we do is, this is what other buyers are seeing.
Yep.
So
Yep.
let's look at it from what other buyers are seeing, in the same way you would go if you were going to buy anything.
Yep.
And then we go through our comps.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. So we're already about 20 minutes in. So
oh,
yeah,
yes.
anything you want to throw out there and wrap up with negotiation? Any tips? Any advice?
Well, I think we've hit it like 5 or 6 times, but
Yeah.
the emotion has to stay out of it. You are a professional, and that doesn't mean that you have no heart in it. It just means that when we're dealing with other people, and we're dealing with, I mean, we're really representing people's largest financial investment.
Yep.
So this is a practiced thing. You have to practice negotiation every single day.
Yep.
In everything you do. And when you put that emotion into it, although you feel like you're helping because you're just so invested in it, it's really hurting because you're not clearly thinking about the seller on the other end or the buyer on the other end. So that would be my biggest thing, is take that emotion out of it and really just look at what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes, you need to be the strong, unwavering source of support,
Yep.
source of reassurance for both your buyer and seller, because this is a very emotional process for them, whether either buyer or seller. So you need to be that rock that doesn't waver and just provides them with a source of comfort and confidence. And the best way to do that is just to remove that emotion, make sure you understand what they're going through, but also advise them rationally so they ensure that they make a rational decision, not emotional decision.
Right. And last thing I have to say, because it just popped in my head, is do your homework.
Yes.
We get paid a very good amount of money for a reason. And some transactions are easy and you kind of feel like, wow, that was great.
Yeah.
The reality is we owe it to our clients. That's our job.
Yep.
So when you are getting ready to negotiate, do the background homework first. Be ready. Know your steps of negotiation so that you know if this agent or whoever throws a curveball this way, I'm doing this. If they throw a curveball this way, I'm doing this. Be prepared in advance, because that's why we get paid what we get paid.
Absolutely.
So-
Absolutely. This was a good one.
Yeah.
This was a really good one.
did
So hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some value out of it. Like, comment, share the video, and we'll be coming at you again next month with some more good material. So thanks for watching, guys.
Good luck.
Nailed it.